Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Big Game Hunters. I'm Mike.
And I'm Tom. Today, we're going to review the exciting shipbuilding game Galaxy Trucker. But first, Chit Chat.
In today's Chit Chat, we're going to be talking about player mentality, the idea that we have certain shared expectations, concepts of kingmaking, and alpha gaming. We hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the Chit Chat. Today, we're going to be talking about what we call player mentality. This is sometimes referred to as a metagame, though I think of metagaming differently, maybe for another Chit Chat, maybe not. But what we're talking about here are going to be things that are kind of inherent in the players that are sometimes drawn out by the designs of the game, but are primarily kind of different psychological things that come up over and over again. What I'm thinking about here is alpha gaming, kingmaking, shared expectations about what a game should have, and then designs that kind of lend themselves to any of these.
Okay.
So what kind of made me think of this, what kind of spurred on this chit-chat topic, was I was playing a game of Marvel Heroes with a number of my friends, and so to condense it, one player won because of another player's action, or as another player perceived it, inaction. So in that game, kingmaking is kind of inevitable. We'll get to that in a second, but it's a core part of the game. Your winning that game is pretty dependent on other players doing certain things. It's a pretty light game, mostly experiential. Now, that said, the player who did not win got very annoyed, and he started to explain it at length the reasons why he was annoyed, the reasons why he thought it was unfair or it was a kind of a dick move. And he came up with a sort of, we pushed him on it, and over time he came up with a sort of a series of rules that he follows and that he felt that everybody at the table should follow, and that everybody at the table already was following. So when pressed on it, he came up with 4 rules. The first one ended up being don't make alliances. The first one is not to win the game, actually. It initially was to win. He pushed that number to number 2. So the first thing you should try to do in a game is not make alliances. You should always try to play for yourself. Then he argued you should try to win the game. Then, after that, if you can't win, you should just try to place as highly as you can. Take second. If a decision comes up that neither of those factors are relevant, you should essentially go through this checklist when making a play. The fourth thing, I'm not making this up, the fourth thing is to try to do what you can to be as little disruptive to the rest of the game as possible. In other words, don't take actions that will be the least, have the least ripple effect and do the least in terms of determining the outcome of the game. So we heard these, and I kind of agree with him on trying to win the game. I think you do have to have that shared expectation going into a game. If somebody isn't playing to a win as their primary goal, I think that does kind of throw the game.
That's interesting. I'm going to have to say that the kinds of game that player can enjoy is going to be fairly limited.
Yes, the player who follows the 4 rules?
Yeah.
Certainly.
Because there are games that require you to make alliances, and I don't know if there's any games that don't put winning first in their strategy, but they're making alliances first and foremost. There are several games that do that. There are games where it's not a factor, and a game where it just sort of naturally arises too. Like particularly some party games, you can just sort of naturally fall into that. It seems like that's a little too strict of a mentality to adapt if you're just going to call yourself a board gamer.
I agree. That was kind of what we said. We were saying that those were expectations that only he was bringing to the table that were not inherent in the game and that we didn't share. And I think that was the root of why we ended up in like an hour and a half, 2-hour debate after the game. So there was definitely some controversy surrounding this win. And it got me thinking, what are some of the real shared expectations that we all bring to the game? If they don't match up, what happens?
Yeah. I can't say I've ever really thought about that. I guess when I'm going to a game, my expectations are that everyone there is there primarily to have fun. I've said many times before, games have a social layer. The best part about tabletop gaming is interacting with other people, at least for me. So I guess my number 2 expectation might be that you're expected to socialize. No, I'm not saying I expect my opponents to engage me in conversation and things like that. But
ever tell a few jokes in between plays?
But right, like if they're going to get annoyed because I'm telling jokes, something like that, then the issue might come up.
Sure.
But other than that, think I have any real considerations. Obviously, trying to win. I mean, it is a game. You do want to do well.
I do agree wholeheartedly that one's important. So I would put that as my probably one and only. If somebody's coming to a game and isn't trying to win, it really does kind of make the game fall apart in a lot of ways. We use the example of, hey, that's my fish. Pretty short game. Nobody's going to get too heated over that's my fish. But if somebody's not playing it optimally, if somebody is just kind of moving around, grabbing fish randomly, not really paying attention to the game, it creates openings for, if other veteran players are playing, for them to win. And it makes it difficult for the players who maybe aren't influenced by those plays, because every play is going to have a ripple in a game like that. And it's unavoidable. And so if somebody isn't playing optimally, that can be annoying. And I can understand Ron's frustration in that instance.
So I guess perhaps if your expectations at the table aren't all the same, or rather, if you come without that expectation, without the expectation of I'm here to win. If I go to a place and I'm only there to socialize and I end up annoying that's my fish players, am I in breach of some social contract?
I don't think that there is a universal one to gaming. I think it's going to vary from playgroup to playgroup. For instance, I sometimes do succumb to analysis paralysis. I take generally longer than the average amount of time to make a play. I like to look through plays and really sink my teeth into a game. And I don't feel like I should have to apologize for that. I like to play with other people who will respect the time it takes me. I'm not saying that it can't, sometimes be exorbitant. It does, and if they say something, I can respect that. But for the most part, I do not enjoy playing with people who rush me. That's not a social contract for all of gaming. Not every player is going to agree with that. But that's going to be something that's important for my play group. If I'm going to be playing with people regularly, they can't rush me. We are going to clash.
I guess that falls sort of in line with like new players learning games will often take longer to settle their turn, and the experienced player at the table will start nudging them. So that sort of leads us into kingmaking.
Sure.
Also a similar kind of player mentality issue. What do you think?
For kingmaking, I think that it's a tricky one. Everybody has their own ideas about it. The idea of kingmaking, of course, is when one player figures out that he can't be the king, he can at least be the kingmaker. And so that's where the term comes from. And a kingmaker is a player who makes a play that does not advance his or her own goal of winning, sometimes because that opportunity is passed, sometimes not, but instead advances some other player's opportunity to win. You'll often see this in games where some player gets pushed out early and then is a prisoner of the game otherwise. So that player has nothing to do but try to punish the player who knocked him out.
Sure.
Other times you'll see players just do this right off the bat. That can be frustrating.
I actually misspoke. I said kingmaking. I meant to say alpha gaming. So the new player taking a long time on his turn gets nudged by the experienced player at the table. When does that cross the line into alpha gaming?
Okay, so to jump topics a little bit with alpha gaming, I think that's going to mostly come up into co-op games. So for alpha gaming, you're going to have a problem if people are working together on the same team. Either it's a team versus team game, or it's a group game they're trying to win as a team. That's when it's often going to come in because it's in the player's vested interest for the new players to do well.
Sure.
And certain ones are more prone to this than others. For something like Arkham Horror, it's very easy to tell other players what the optimal move is. For something like our buddy Space Cadets back there, it's a little harder, which is why I enjoy it. That's not as big a part of the game. The more alpha gaming crept into Shadows over Camelot, the less my group enjoyed it.
Wow. So do we have any other player mentality issues we need to cover?
To get back to kingmaking a little bit, I wanted to talk about the idea that I think kingmaking is kind of in three circles at once. It's a problem with design because if a game makes it very easy for a player to get pushed out and have a very small chance of winning. Earlier, we stole James Ernest's definition that a game is fun so long as every player believes he or she has a reasonable chance of winning. If a player is a prisoner of the game, then he's very likely to take actions that are going to be perceived as kingmaking. He has nothing better to do. Even if he wants to win, he can't. It's moot. So it's kind of a design flaw. It can be a design flaw. It can be a player issue. There are some people who think, kingmaking, you should always do everything you can to avoid it, like the 4 rules we discussed. So There are some people who think, no, don't do it no matter what. Avoid it at all costs. It's toxic. There's also a good argument to be made that kingmaking is a natural part of games, and it's no problem at all. If you want to do it, knock yourself out. So I just think that's part of, I think it all is encompassed by that shared expectations that going into a game, no matter what the game is, if you have a different idea about kingmaking than someone else, you might bump heads.
So are these the kinds of things when you're establishing a play group, a group who's going to be playing together all the time, are these the kind of things you would talk with them about, or are you going to let them naturally develop? Or
I've never sat down with somebody and said, "Oh, how do you feel about kingmaking?" and kind of take it to that. Yeah. So it just comes up naturally. Usually it's your gaming group is friends you already have, so you'll kind of just come to a consensus. You'll work it out in the best you can. But if you have a group of stubborn gamers like I do, it can be an issue, and you just have to kind of muddle through it. If if you're playing with people you don't know well, sometimes it makes you not play with those people. It can push you toward not playing with them.
That can be rough.
It sure can. But I think that's about all we have to say about player mentality. So now we're going to teach you how to play Galaxy Trucker. Now I'm going to teach you how to play Galaxy Trucker. Galaxy Trucker is the frantic game of building a spaceship and watching it crumble to pieces around you on your voyage. The goal of the game is to have the most cosmic credits. The game is played over 3 rounds, and at the end of the 3rd round, you'll simply tally scores and determine the winner. As you can see, a lot of components come in the box. There's a 1.5-minute timer, 8 plastic ships, 2 D6s, plastic astronauts, brown and pink aliens, 4 different colors of resource cubes, these great translucent batteries, round 1, 2, and 3 cards, round 1, 2, and 3 boards, and a lot of ship tiles, and finally, cosmic credits. The life fuel of Galaxy Trucker are the spaceship tiles. The tiles have smooth sides and the number of connectors on them. A smooth side cannot be connected to any type of connector, but can face internally in your ship if appropriate. A universal connector has 3 prongs and can be connected to any other type of connector. A single connector has 1 prong and can only connect to other single connectors and to the universal connector. A double connector has 2 prongs and can connect to other double connectors and to the universal connector. The most important piece of your ship is the pilot cabin. You'll start only with the pilot cabin in the center of your shipboard. The pilot cabin begins play with 2 astronauts on it. You can hold additional astronauts on your ship in crew cabins. A crew cabin holds 2 astronauts unless you choose to give it an alien life support system. If an alien life support system is connected directly to a pilot cabin, instead of putting 2 astronauts in the cabin, you can put 1, either brown or pink alien, depending on the color of the life support. Your ship can also have batteries. A battery begins play with 3 energy tokens if it has 3 cells, or 2 energy tokens if it has only 2 cells. This is a 3-cell battery. These energy tokens will be spent throughout the course of the game to power shields, double cannons, and double engines. Shields protect your ship from small objects. The shield will only protect the 2 sides of the ship that it is oriented on. Again, anytime you want to use the shield, you must power it using an energy token. Next up are cargo holds and special cargo holds. These work the same, except that cargo holds can only hold yellow, blue, and green resources, while the special cargo hold can hold all 4 types. That means it includes red. Next are cannons and double cannons. Cannons fire in the direction they are oriented. If they are facing toward the front of your ship, they will only fire in that column. If they are facing the right or left side of your ship, They will fire at the entire side of the ship. This means they will protect your ship from a wide variety of obstacles coming from those sides. The cannons do not require any energy to use, but a double cannon needs an energy token in order to be activated. If it does not have enough energy available, then it does nothing. In addition, cannons cannot directly face any other component of your ship. Engines and double engines work similarly. An engine cannot be placed such that the exhaust faces any other component of your ship. The same is, of course, true for double engines. Just like cannons, a double engine needs an energy cell in order to be used. These will allow you to move faster through open space. Finally, Galaxy Trucker includes a number of cards which will depict the dangers you'll face on your voyage. First up is open space. If you encounter an open space card, you'll simply move your ship a number of spaces along the track equal to your engine rating. If you encounter another player's ship, you will not count that space when moving. Therefore, it's very easy to move around other players' ships. You may also find planets. At the bottom of the card in the square, you'll see the number of days it will take to land on one of these planets. If you choose to land on one of them, you'll move your ship back in the same way you moved forward for open space. You'll move it back the number of spaces as shown by the number of days, then place your extra ship token on one of the available planets. When you do so, you'll collect the resources shown on the planet and place them in any available cargo holds you have. You may choose to replace old resources with new ones. You may also find an abandoned ship. An abandoned ship works similarly to planets in that it costs a number of days to get the resources, but instead of costing cargo space, you'll have to spend astronauts. For instance, this abandoned ship would require me to give up 3 astronauts in order to get 4 cosmic credits. Also abandoned sometimes are abandoned stations. This works similarly to abandoned ships, except instead of paying the astronauts, you just have to have that many in order to take advantage of this card. Again, you'll spend the number of days required. You may also encounter some less friendly things on your voyage, like this meteoric swarm. When resolving a meteor swarm, you'll resolve all large and small meteors from top to bottom. In this case, first, a large meteor will come from the front of your ship, then a small meteor from the left, and finally a small meteor from the right. When resolving meteors, you'll roll 2d6 and add the results together to determine what row or column, depending on orientation, the meteor will hit. If the meteor misses your ship completely, there's no problem. A small meteor will only hit open connections. This means that if you have a single, double, or universal connection facing away from your ship, and a small meteor hits that piece, that part is removed, and any parts that depended on it are also removed. You can also choose to deflect a small meteor with shields on the appropriate side. Remember that you must spend an energy token in order to power shields. Large meteors, however, must be shot down by cannons. When meteors are coming from your front or rear, you must have cannons facing in the appropriate column in order to shoot them. However, if a large meteor is coming from the left or right of your ship, any cannon facing in that direction can shoot down the meteor. In your travels, you may also come across enemy ships. When you encounter an enemy ship, you must fight it. To defeat the enemy ship, you'll need a weapons rating equal to or greater than the difficulty. Your weapons rating is a combination of your cannons, your powered double cannons, and if you have a pink alien, you'll get a +2 to your weapons rating, assuming you have at least 1 active cannon. If you defeat the enemy ship, you'll spend the number of days required and then gain the number of cosmic credits or resources. However, if you are defeated by it, then you will take the consequences as described here. This enemy ship will fire a small laser at your front, then a large laser at your front, and finally another small laser at your front. Lasers are resolved the same way as meteors. You'll roll 2d6 and add them together, and that's the column or row that the laser will come into. Small lasers can be deflected by shields, but large lasers will simply destroy whatever component they hit and any components that depended on it. You may also find yourself floating into a combat zone. A combat zone affects all players, and the player with the lowest value in each category will suffer a consequence. For this particular battle, the player with the fewest astronauts will lose 3 days. Then, the player with the lowest engine rating will lose 2 astronauts. Finally, the player with the lowest weapons rating will take 1 small laser from the rear and then 1 large laser from the rear. Finally, you may encounter a special event. Special events have a wide variety of effects, and there's no way to predict what they'll do. To set up a game of Galaxy Trucker, first, each player will choose a color and take a round 1 board. Place your pilot cabin on the center stage of the board, and now you're ready to build the adventure deck. The adventure deck is set up in 3 piles. Each pile will have 2 cards from the current round's deck and 1 card from each of the lower numbered rounds decks. Once you've done that, then you place the 1, 2, 3, and 4 markers for a 4-player game. You only use the number of markers that you have number of players next to the board for players to grab when they're finished building their first ship. The first part of every round is constructing your ship. This is a time section, so you gotta be quick. To begin, you'll flip the sand timer over on the number 3 space. At any point later in this building process, a player may, if he chooses, flip an empty sand timer over to the next space down. When the sand timer runs out while it's on the start space, that signals the end of the building process, and everyone has to fly whatever he slapped together. When you're digging through the warehouse, you'll have to pick up a tile, move it completely over your player board, and take a look at it. If the tile was face up, you of course may look at it before you do so. If it was face down, you flip it over and may do one of 3 things. First, you can place it back in the warehouse, either to pick up later or for other players to take. Second, you can store it on your player board. You can only have 2 unslotted tiles on your player board at a given time, and these tiles must be built into your ship at some point during the building process. If they aren't, they'll be worth negative points at the end. Finally, of course, you can place a tile onto your ship. You'll start play with just your player cabin in the center, and you'll have to build out from that. Tiles cannot be placed on slots on your ship that are not connected to anything else, and any illegally placed tiles will fall off your ship at the end of the building process. In addition, you may take a break from the building process to sift through the adventure deck. The adventure deck will be placed in the 3 different piles, and you may pick up any one pile and take a look at it for as long as you need. When you have a pile in your hand, you may not do any construction on your ship. It's important to remember that any tiles that are locked into your ship cannot be removed unless they fall off at the end. As soon as you're finished building your ship, you'll grab the lowest numbered token available. Once everyone is finished building, or time has run out, and you all have tokens, you'll place your ships on the triangles in the appropriate order. So player 1 will place his ship in the red triangle with everyone following suit. Then you'll take the 3 piles with the adventure deck and add 1 more pile built identically to the others and shuffle them together. Now you have the adventure deck and you're ready to fly through space. Galaxy Trucker does not proceed in individual turns. Instead, the game is driven by flipping over adventure cards and resolving them in order. The first player in line will always flip over the top adventure card from the adventure deck. If it's an adventure that multiple players will compete in, then they do so. However, if it's a single player mission, like this abandoned ship, then the player in the lead will have the option to either complete the mission by spending the appropriate number of days, or pass on it. If he passes, then the next player in line makes the same choice, and so on. After using every adventure card, every player will have the opportunity to drop out of the race. You may also be forced to drop out. If you do not have any human crew members on your ship, you'll have to drop out. If you get lapped by another player, you'll have to drop out. And finally, if you encounter an open space card and have no engine rating, you'll be forced to drop out. If you drop out of the race, you do not participate in the beauty contest at the end of the round, and you do not get any points for completing the race. However, you do still get to sell your goods for half price. Players who finish the race by getting through all the adventure cards will sell their goods for full price. Those are the multicolored cubes. They will get points based on where they finished, and these points will depend on the round number. And finally, a one-time single point value bonus, will be given out to the winner of the beauty contest. The winner of the beauty contest is the player whose surviving ship has the fewest number of open connections at the end. Now you know how to play Galaxy Trucker. Now that you know how to play Galaxy Trucker, we're going to take a look at it in our point-counterpoint review.
Because Mike and I agree about the game, I'm going to roll to see who will argue for it and who will argue against. If it's even, I'll take the pros, and if it's odd, he will.
It's a 3, so I'm going to tell you how much I love Galaxy Trucker. Again, I'm going to tell you how much I love a game.
And I just hate games, so...
Tom, spiteful soul that he will tell you how Galaxy Trucker should just be put in the bin, the trash bin.
Terrible.
But even you, Tom, as much as you apparently hate fun, can agree that there's just something undeniably fun about building your ship in Galaxy Trucker. It's frenetic, it's crazy, the timer really drives the whole thing. I just feel like no matter what you do when you're building your ship, you're having a great time. There's just something really crazy about everyone digging through the warehouse, trying to get the pieces they need, grabbing for those shields, looking desperately for the right kind of connectors. It's just really fun. And you know what? Sometimes, especially in your first few games, you're going to put together a bad ship. But the beauty of the game is because it's so fast, and because it's played in 3 rounds, and each ship is starting fresh on the new round, it doesn't hurt you too bad if you put together a bad one. So if in round 1 you throw together some half-cocked jalopy, you can come back still in round 2 with a nice sleek aerial craft.
I think I might dislike this game and possibly all games in general because
I won't tell.
It's so easy to build a bad ship, and I don't necessarily mean a ship that gets torn apart by the space debris and pirates and things. I mean, there's just so many things to remember. So if you're using double lasers and double engines and shields, make sure you've got batteries to power them. If you've got to make sure you have the pink cargo connectors. You've got to make sure all the things connect the right way. There's just a lot of things to remember, and because shipbuilding is so fast, it's really easy to accidentally build an illegal ship. And that is no fun when you're doing the review process of the building and either you or one of your opponents finds something wrong with your ship. You just have to wipe out half your board. That's no fun. And because also there's so many different aspects, different connectors and things, your neighbor might even miss it, and you might play 3/4 of the round with an illegal connection, and you just got a dead alien on your ship, and you don't know it.
I have heard about your dead alien powering your ship, Tom, and I don't approve. But quite frankly, I can overlook that, even though it is a little bit tricky if you're not pleasing your teammates well or your neighbors well. It's still so fun to do the build process. I know I'm still talking about it, but it's worth 2 pros, guys, because the second part of it is the timer. Now, it's a 1.5-minute timer. We found that out today. 1.5-minute timer, and it works pretty well just as a timing mechanic, but the really ingenious part here is that it's the player's choice to flip it. So nobody has to flip the timer at any time. And when you're building your 3rd round ship, most people don't flip it immediately on any of the individual numbers because they need a little more time to build such a huge ship. But the cool part is, if you're winning in the early turns, in the early rounds of the game, in that later round, you can force everyone to build a really quick ship. You can just flip it as soon as you want, and then you can make it so that everyone has to have a small ship because you're already ahead. You don't want them to be able to get a ton of points. So there's some extra kind of strategy going on with the timer that I haven't seen before. So not only does that keep the pace of the game lightning fast, but it also adds some kind of cool gameplay elements to the building phase.
The building phase is really fun. It's really, it's a really good design. Everybody's reaching for the same tiles. It's forced by time. There's nothing confusing really about it other than you might screw up your building. But we've already talked about that. My problem really is with the rest of the game. It's not bad. The elements of the space cards, the encounters and things that you'll find, there's nothing poorly designed about them, but they just don't feel quite as clean as the rest of the game. So when you're counting on the racetrack, it just sort of feels a little less than intuitive to ignore other players. I understand why it's that. I'm sorry, include other players. Ignore other players? Which way does it go?
You don't count the spaces that the other players are on. He wasn't here for the tutorial.
Right. It just feels less than intuitive. I remember when I was doing it, I wanted to do that, and then I couldn't, and then it kept screwing me up.
I think we all remember that.
Yeah. Now, I understand why it works that way. You need to have first, second, third, fourth, whatever, everyone in place. But it doesn't feel great. And the other aspect are the cards. There's lots of things to remember. It's like a super complex game of rock, paper, scissors where little meteors are beat by shields and big meteors are shot down by lasers, but you have to target the laser in the front, but you don't need to target laser on the side. And nothing stops a big laser, but little lasers can be stopped by shields. And there's just a lot to remember there.
Yeah,
Did I get them all?
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
And it's just really frustrating to have to remember all that when the rest of the game is just so fast and fun.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with that part. When I was going through the tutorial, it was really slogged when I was trying to explain how you fight the pirates, for instance. There's a lot going on with that. And for a game like this that's so light and fun and quick, it's a little bit of a hassle to have to explain everything of that to a new player. There's a little bit more of a barrier of entry than I'd like. But I think the mechanics just really drive it. I know we haven't mentioned how immersive the game is, but I think that's just because it has so many cool mechanics. The dice rolling for determining where something hits. That's the last one I really want to cover. That, I think, now longtime viewers of the show will know that I hate dice. I try to excise them from my games whenever possible. I don't use the small world reinforcement die, for instance. And you know what? A game that I otherwise would love that would be an easy 10 for me, like Mage Wars, is lowered because the dice rolling is such a big part of it.
So important in that game.
In this game, though, dice are very well implemented. This is one of the few where I'm totally fine with dice. I think they really represent what they're trying to convey. When you have pass me that shipboard, when you have the shipboard and you're rolling dice to determine where the meteors or lasers will hit your ship, it's just so intuitive the way it's set up. Your ship is more likely to hit in the center because of the normal distribution of the dice, and the outside sectors are more likely to miss. It just feels so natural to do it. It's so simple, so clean. It just works great for watching debris and lasers and all kinds of space junk coming at you. Yeah. Really well handled.
And when you're building your ship, you see that your exposed ports are on the 4 or the 3. You're like, okay, I'll take that risk.
Yeah, because you know the odds based on the dice.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, all that is all great and true. But I want to talk lastly about the price. Before I talk about the price, I want to talk about the components. I don't have any problem with the components. The components are great.
Sure.
The miniatures are fine. You get these nice little glass beads.
The beads are neat.
The tiles they're getting nice and durable. There's nothing flimsy about the cards. Everything is greatly produced. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing in the box that makes me think, oh wow, this game is worth the price I paid for it.
Yeah.
It's just too expensive for what comes in the box.
No disagreement there. You win that round, Tom, because it's really expensive for what you're getting. No pre-painted minis, nothing elaborate. It's a lot of cardboard and cardstock for a lot of money.
Yep. Well, I do like the game. It's unfortunate that I had to take the cons again on this one. But it's really fun. And when I can, I'm going to pick it up. Maybe I'll wait for it to see it on sale somewhere. But I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I also enjoy this one quite a bit. This is a game that I think really fills that kind of frenetic, crazy gameplay niche that I don't really have with anything else. Other than maybe Space Cadets, I can't think of another timed game that I'm really into. Mm-hmm. But this one just grabs me. I'm waffling about it. I think I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 also. I've been kind of wanting to play it ever since we played it to review it. Yeah. And we just haven't had the time. But yeah, I want this one to hit the table again. Solid 8 out of 10 for me.
Well, I think the only thing we haven't really talked about with Galaxy Trucker is the theme song and the cartoon.
Absolutely, Tom.
Stay tuned soon from the Big Game Hunters, a promo for the forthcoming cartoon and music video of Galaxy Trucker in the Breakdown.
This is news to me.
This is the Breakdown for Galaxy Trucker. My producer tells me that I can't produce a music video and that we don't have the budget for a cartoon, so Maybe we'll do a Kickstarter. The game takes about an hour and a half to play, unless you have players who really push the building phase. So we give it 45 short and 55 long. We give it 95 fast because the whole game is played out in unison. We give it 5 slow because if you're the first to finish your ship, you do have to wait for another minute and a half to 2 minutes. It's roughly equal on luck and skill. We give it 45-55. We give the edge to skill because a well-built ship will probably do better than a random one. Shipbuilding is all tactical, whether you look ahead at the cards or not. So unless you employ a strategy of just racing or just carrying cargo for each race, there's not too much strategy. We give it 15 strategy and 85 tactics. We give it 20 interaction for the tile grabbing that's competitive between players, and the movement on the track can be affected by other players, but the rest plays out in conjunction with no direct influence from other players, so we give it 80 independence. It's a simple game at its core, so we give it 75 simplicity. It's not too terribly hard to learn. There is a bit of a memory game in the space effect cards, so we give it a 25 complexity. We give it 30 portability and 70 grandeur. It's a larger than average game on the table, but it fits in a smaller than average sized box. The components are great, but nothing too impressive. We give it 50-50 on expandability and completeness. There are 2 expansions already, and there's probably going to be more on the way, but the base game has plenty of replay value. On the trophy scales, we give it 5 trophies for originality. There's nothing quite like it out there. It has a very unique building phase, especially with the player-driven timer. For value, we give it only 1 trophy. It's very expensive, and there's nothing inside the box to justify the cost. Both Mike and Tom give Galaxy Trucker an 8 out of 10, and that is the breakdown.
We hope you enjoyed trucking around the galaxy with us today in Galaxy Trucker. Next week, in a very mechanical chit-chat, we're going to be talking about creating decision points in games and game flow. Also, we'll be playing Lost Cities, the exploration game from Reiner Knizia.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel for regular updates. See the links below for our Facebook and Twitter pages, and leave us your thoughts in the comments on kingmaking.
See you next week.
Hey Tom,
Yeah.
I told me about your idea about the cartoon and
Yeah.
music video.
Awesome, right?
Good idea we're not doing it.
Come on.
How much money do you have?
You're the... I don't know, you tell me.
No. Sorry Thomas. Keep putting the game away and do the breakdown.
Galaxy Trucker!